Spotify podcast subscriptions and listeners are just going through the roof, leaving Apple in the dust, and I'm going to tell you why. Hey everyone, if this is your first time here, my name is Rich Cardona. You could talk to me about podcasting because I am a podcaster, and our team produces some of the world's best podcasts. So thank you in advance. As always, I like to start with what's going on in here and what cameras we're using and all that other stuff in case for subscribing to the channel, but we're gonna get into some things and you are gonna get into podcasting or video podcasting. You don't need any of this stuff, but I wanna cover this stuff. So I got a Canon R6 Mark II over there on a tripod that Joe, I think, got at a garage sale or someone hooked him up out on a mission trip or something, so that's pretty cool. He's got another one here. This is another tripod, and directly in front of me is a Canon R6 Mark II again, and then we got the lavalier mic that I'm using. Because even though I'm podcasting, I don't want to be sitting at my desk and just podcasting, because then you're going to think in order to podcast, that's what you have to do when you can do a podcast just like this from time to time. Other thing you should know, we got, what is this? An Amaran 60D light with this like big cover. What do you call these? A lantern? I don't even know what you call it. Anyway, to help me stay well lit. I got natural light here, but you gotta fight light with light. So I need to be well lit. I need to be able to be seen clearly. So that's why we got the light. I love natural light more than anything, but whatever. So, and then lastly, one thing I did not do in previous ones is the book I'm reading right now is called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. Very entrepreneurial book, and it's all about avoiding the dumb tax, but the premise of the book is always to help you engage in what we don't do enough of, and that is thinking time. Not thinking and like making a plan, but like just literally taking time to think about some of the biggest posing questions in your business. So now that that's done, let's talk about Spotify podcasts and Spotify itself. What we've noticed with our top clients right now is that initially it seems like the audience is kind of already there on Apple Podcasts. The Apple Podcast app is very well known. Of course, it's Apple. But Spotify and their paid subscriptions, it just continues to get better and better, but they're introducing features that they want to completely differentiate themselves from Apple. Now, if you look at the two biggest podcast consumption, well, the three biggest podcast consumption platforms, it's actually YouTube is starting to go way high and to the right because they're putting a lot of attention behind it. I've covered that in previous videos and I will continue to cover that kind of stuff. But Apple seemingly just like had this gap that you couldn't close, and now it's getting closed very, very quickly with Spotify. And here's a couple stats that I felt like were relevant for you to know. And this is Spotify's financials from Q2 of 2023. Monthly active users grew 27% to 551 million. The last time I was looking, they were under 500 million, so they're growing pretty substantially. Paid subscribers also grew 17% to 220 million. Paid subscribers could be one of two things. It could be people like me who pay, I think, I don't know, whatever it is, $11.99 a month, so I could find all the things I want, download all the things I want, all those good things. Other paid subscribers could be for your exclusive content, which is something Spotify introduced. And then podcast revenue was up 30% year on year. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But let's just really talk about the big difference between Apple and Spotify right now. One of them is old, one of them is a little bit newer, and one of them is trying to keep up with the times. And Spotify is doing that very heavily with its advent of video podcasts. Now you could have video podcasts on Spotify. It's been months that you can actually do this, and we've been experimenting since about March with a couple, well actually all our clients at this point. If you have a video podcast, it's non-negotiable. It's like, if you're gonna work with us, we're gonna make sure you have video on your Spotify podcast. Why? Because people like to watch. In a previous video I made, we were talking about how 83% of people feel more connected to the host because they see them. 77% of people are actually retaining more information because they're able to see and listen. And some people, I mean, like, this is huge. Some people listen to the podcast audio only and then be like, now I'm gonna go watch it. So Spotify is trying to say like, look, you can do that right here. So the biggest piece to the puzzle here is Spotify video. So in order to do that, you're gonna have to have a Spotify for Podcasters account. I'm not gonna walk you through that. What I am gonna walk you through is some of the statistics you can get from video. Okay, getting statistics for podcasts is kind of challenging, and demographics as well, but this just adds another layer of information that you can gather to be like, okay, What gets measured gets better, and you will be able to look and start asking yourselves the questions on what can improve your content. So we'll get into that in a second. The other thing that Spotify's got going on, which just seems so minor, but they have clickable timestamps. Clickable timestamps is simply this. In your description, 2 minutes ago, we could talk about how I could make a timestamp for Spotify video podcast, right? And let's just say this is a 20-minute long video. I could have timestamps for certain segments or certain subject matters within the podcast, just like YouTube chapters, I think is what they call it. If I'm on the Spotify app and I hit some of these timestamps because I see something that I already want to hear, I could go right to it instead of making me kind of figure out where to go and scroll back and forth until I could find that spot. So that makes it very convenient. Again, they're paying attention to the consumer. That's a pretty big deal. They also now have their own kind of chart ranking system, just like Apple does. So very big deal. Like you could say, I'm showing up number 10 on Apple, number 8 on Spotify Business, something along those lines. So they are saying, we're also a king maker here. Like we're gonna have our own charts and we're gonna monitor our own stuff and we're gonna start promoting people and making them want the status that they want to achieve through their podcast. Last but not least, they have Q&A polls. So you have the ability to go into episode by episode, ask a question about the episode. You could ask a question about something generally. What does that do? It's engaging the audience. It's the only real difference between Apple and Spotify in regards to one particular advantage Apple might have is that Apple has written reviews that you could submit. Spotify does not. It's just ratings. And you know what? Like reviews are not a big a deal as people think, and I will be the first. If you didn't know this, now you know. Ratings and reviews have almost no impact on the discoverability of your podcast. They definitely have no impact on downloads. Okay, so I've literally researched this many times, and that's where we're at. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna screen share what I'm looking at, and that way you could follow along with me. This is a client, we're gonna have to blur it out, but pretty high profile client. I just think this is really important for you guys to see some of the information that you can get when you have a Spotify video podcast and why they're starting to lead the way. So you would have what's called your catalog. You go home, and if you have multiple shows, you're gonna have the ability to pick one of them. Okay, I go ahead and I click on the show, and let's go ahead and get some stats out of the way really quick. Starts 5.9 million all time. This is specifically to Spotify. That means someone listened to 0 seconds or more. Okay, that's all you know what a start is. A stream here, all time 4.4 million. This is the number of times anyone listened to at least 1 minute of your podcast. Okay, listeners, this is people all time who've listened. Followers are the people who actually follow you, which means they subscribed to the podcast, they hit the plus sign or they hit the follow button, and now they are in this person's regular rotation. Okay, now when we go to the episode lineups, you can see that it's distinguished with video and audio. Now it looks like, there's no stats here, but that was just because it happened to be released today. So I'm gonna go to, I'll click on here, which we know was a video. Let's look at some of the analytics related to video. So the analytics are a little bit different than a regular podcast episode. So we have starts and streams, and then you have listener starts and streams. So this is essentially, like it says right here, the numbers aggregate all your video and stats since published. So this is for a specific episode. So about 21,000 people started it, period. Almost 16,000 went 60 seconds or more. And then you have the kind of same stats in terms of straight listenership. Total consumption hours, meaning like how much of this podcast, audio or visual, was consumed, 3,324 hours. Now look, you might have 1 hour, you might have 10 hours, you might have 100 hours, but that's just a really good way to look at your progress. If someone listened to you, or if people listen to you for any amount of hours during any week for a specific episode, that should be something that you are motivated by, excited by, and something that you want to increase. That means people are paying attention. Now let's go to video stats. So each unique viewer had the video visible on their screen. So that was about 4,669. That's about 43% of this particular client's total followers or audience, which is 10,739. Lastly, you have watch hours, okay? So this is not overall consumption hours. This is an amount people actually watched, 880 hours. That's only 27% of the episode playtime. So this is an indicator. Was there a drop off somewhere? Was there anything significant that made only a quarter of the video something that people wanted to watch? Or are these people simply, just more interested in listening? And obviously the disparity is pretty obvious here. 3,324. Let's just do this. Alexa, what's 3,324 minus 888?
3,324 minus 888 is 2,436.
I don't do math, by the way. Alexa's my friend. So 2,400 hours, that's a 2,400 hour disparity. So 2,400 people chose to listen. That's how many more hours were listened to versus how many were, watched. That just means, look, this is a platform that's adjusting. Like, video's fairly new. People are not just going there to watch. When you think of something to go watch a video, you're going one of two places. Okay, if you're going for long form content, you're going to YouTube. If you're going for short form content, you're probably going to Instagram. So that's important to know. Then we look at episode performance over the last 7 days. Because this was posted not too long ago, but more than 7 days ago, we want to go to all time. And as we see here, look, there's nothing crazy. There's not like a massive dip, which means like there wasn't a certain segment, a certain point that made people say, I'm out of here. It just kind of was a slow decline. People actively listen on podcasts, but people also passively listen. And if they happen to be driving or whatever it is, and maybe they got a phone call, then maybe they click off the podcast because that's what happened. But nothing super concerning here. Average listen time was 22 minutes and 49 seconds. 76% of people listen a quarter of the way through, 68, 62, 56, all the way. So average listen was 22 minutes and 49 seconds for a 22 minute and 49 second episode. So that's really actually interesting. That's the average amount of listens was the whole thing. Here's a couple stats that you might be interested. It's not super revealing. In this case, it's very obvious, but it's a big one. But 87% of the people who were listening to it were men, 10% were women, and 2 not specified, and then 9 non-binary, 0.78%. So good on you guys. And then age-wise, you get some indicators here. Yeah, probably 0 to 17-year-olds are probably not listening to this podcast. It's pretty heavy business. 18 to 22, unless you're a young hustler, only 10% of you are the ones listening. The majority are going to fall into 28 to 34, which I'm past that window, but I'm part of the 18.59% of 35 to 44-year-olds that listen. So you got some stats there. Then you got countries. 7,400 streams came from the US, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, okay? What do they all have in common? They're all English-speaking countries. Then you start getting into Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, India. This is actually interesting because what you can do, and we've done this in the past, is be like, for the 108 people who listen to this episode in Mexico, I love you. Orale. You could see, just get creative with it. Address your international audience so they can tell other people in that country or their friends or their family to listen to the episode. So that is the analytics tab of a specific episode. Okay, we're covering video podcasts on Spotify right now and why Spotify is doing pretty massive takeover in the podcast space. I clicked on the details tab and all it was the show description and that's it. So there's nothing really important there. So we're gonna go ahead and bypass that. So just because Spotify has video options for your podcast, does that mean you need to do it? No, it doesn't mean to do it. Consumer behavior takes a long time to change. And look, if people are used to listening, they're gonna listen. If they wanna go watch somewhere, like I mentioned, they kind of know where they wanna go watch. But that doesn't mean Spotify's not gonna push it, okay? Video is a huge element that gives you huge stats that will help you become a better podcaster, but it's also giving you what I covered in terms of engagement. You are allowed to engage with your audience with polls. You can see the responsiveness. You can get the feedback you need to just be better, which is one of my company's core values, which is be a better person, be a better teammate, be better for our clients, be better for ourselves, like all these things. If you measure certain aspects of what you're putting out into the interwebs, then you are going to improve if you care. And lastly, they're looking at timestamps. They just added little small things that are going to allow you to just the listener, to just click ahead to where you want to get. You can watch the video if you want. You can engage if you want. And if you want to see Spotify podcast rankings because you think Apple is completely rigged and full of nonsense, then at least you could look at Spotify and be like, I think their stuff is legit for now. And that's it. So look, if you're recording your video podcast at all, make sure you put it onto Spotify for podcasters. I will walk you through on how to set that up in another video, and we can walk through some of the stats there as well. Until next time, peace.